She told her own father not to come for Christmas, believing she was protecting her future. Days later, she saw him on the national news risking his life to save strangers, and realized she had believed a devastating lie. Stay until the end, because this story is filled with shocking twists, hidden secrets, and a powerful lesson you'll never forget. 3 days before Christmas, my daughter told me not to come. At first, I thought I had misheard her. The call came just after sunset while I was repairing a loose cabinet hinge in my apartment kitchen. I wiped the dust from my hands before answering because I always liked speaking to Alara without distractions. She rarely called unexpectedly, so I smiled when I saw her name on my phone. "Hi, sweetheart." There was a long silence. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded strained, almost rehearsed. "Dad, I need to ask you something. Anything. Please don't come for Christmas." The words landed harder than I expected. I laughed quietly, convinced she was joking. "Very funny. So what time should I arrive?" "I'm serious." My smile disappeared. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I stared through my apartment window at the first snow beginning to fall across the parking lot. Children were throwing snowballs near the entrance while neighbors carried wrapped presents upstairs. Everything outside looked like the beginning of another ordinary Christmas. Inside my apartment, everything suddenly felt different. Did I do something? I finally asked. No. Then why? It's complicated. I waited. She had always been honest with me growing up. Even when she broke something as a child, she would admit it before I noticed. Hearing hesitation in her voice now felt unfamiliar. "The dinner is being held at Nathan's family's estate this year," she explained. "I know. They're inviting business partners, relatives, people from their foundation." "I still don't understand." She exhaled slowly. "It would just be better if you stayed home." Those words hurt more than I wanted to admit. Not because she refused to invite me. Because she refused to explain why. 7 years had passed since my wife, Miriam, lost her battle with cancer. Since then, Christmas had become our promise to each other. No matter how busy life became, Alara and I always shared Christmas together. Sometimes at my apartment. Sometimes at hers. Sometimes at a quiet restaurant, if neither of us wanted to cook. The location never mattered. Being together did. Now, for the first time, she was asking me not to come at all. "I already bought your gifts," I said softly. "I know. I've been making your mother's cinnamon bread." "I know." Another silence. Then she whispered something that sounded almost like an apology. "I'm sorry." Before I could ask another question, she ended the call. I remained standing in my kitchen, still holding the phone against my ear after the screen had gone dark. The apartment felt unusually quiet. The old wall clock ticked loudly. The kettle on the stove continued heating water that I had forgotten about. I slowly walked into the living room where 3 wrapped presents were already waiting beneath a small artificial Christmas tree. One box contained a leather journal I had engraved with Alara's initials. Another held a handmade ornament featuring a tiny wooden bridge. She loved collecting ornaments that reminded her of places we had visited together. The last package contained a recipe book. Not one purchased from a store. One I had assembled myself. After Miriam died, I spent months copying every family recipe from faded note cards into a leather binder so those traditions would never disappear. I had planned to give it to Alara after Christmas dinner. Now I wasn't sure she would ever receive it. That night, I barely slept. I replayed every conversation we had shared during the previous months. Had I embarrassed her somehow? Had I forgotten an important date? Had I become the kind of aging father who didn't realize he was becoming inconvenient? None of the answers felt right. The next morning, I decided not to pressure her. If she needed space, I would give it. Instead of sitting alone feeling sorry for myself, I accepted an invitation from an old volunteer coordinator named Gerald Pike. Every December, Retired engineers and park volunteers inspected emergency shelters throughout Pine Ridge National Forest before heavy snowstorms arrived. I had participated several times over the years. The work was simple. Check roofs. Inspect support beams. Replace damaged supplies. Make sure stranded hikers could survive if winter weather trapped them overnight. Helping strangers sounded healthier than spending Christmas staring at unopened presents. By noon, I loaded my truck with cold weather gear, climbing ropes, flashlights, spare batteries, and a toolbox that had traveled with me through most of my engineering career. The drive toward Pine Ridge took nearly 2 hours. Snow covered the shoulders of the highway, but traffic remained light. Christmas music played softly through the radio, interrupted every few minutes by weather updates warning drivers about worsening road conditions in the mountains. When I reached the volunteer station, Gerald greeted me with his usual grin. "I was hoping you'd come. I figured keeping busy would be better than talking to my television." He laughed without realizing I wasn't entirely joking. Together we reviewed inspection maps before heading toward the first shelter. Everything appeared routine. The roofs held. The support columns remained stable. Emergency food supplies were fully stocked. By late afternoon the snowfall became heavier. Wind pushed loose snow across the mountain roads, reducing visibility. Gerald suggested we finish early. Neither of us argued. As we packed our equipment into the trucks, a distant sound echoed through the valley. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't falling trees. It sounded like twisting metal followed by several sharp impacts. Gerald looked toward the mountain highway. So did I. For one brief second, neither of us moved. Then emergency sirens began screaming somewhere beyond the trees. Without saying another word, we grabbed our gear and started running toward the road. Neither of us knew that within the next few hours, our lives, and my relationship with my daughter, would change forever. By the time Gerald and I reached the highway, flashing emergency lights were already cutting through the falling snow. A sightseeing shuttle had broken through a damaged guardrail and slid halfway down a steep ravine. The front of the vehicle rested against a cluster of pine trees, but the rear hung over open space. Every gust of wind made the metal frame creak. Several passengers were trapped inside. Others were shouting for help through broken windows. Firefighters had arrived within minutes, yet no one could safely approach the shuttle. The hillside was unstable, and chunks of frozen earth continued breaking loose beneath anyone who stepped too close. One commander surveyed the slope before shaking his head. "If the ground gives way, the whole vehicle goes down." No one argued. I studied the scene for only a few seconds before years of engineering experience took over. The angle of the shuttle, the condition of the trees, the weight distribution, the fractured guardrail. I had spent decades evaluating damaged structures after storms and accidents. While I had never planned to use those skills again, the calculations returned almost automatically. I walked toward the commander. "I think we can stabilize it long enough to reach the passengers." He looked at me carefully. "Who are you?" "Anton Vesper, retired structural engineer." Gerald quickly confirmed my background. The commander hesitated only briefly before asking, "What do you need?" I pointed toward our volunteer truck. Climbing ropes, ratchet straps, steel anchors. Within moments, everyone was moving. The firefighters followed instructions without wasting time. We secured anchor points around thick pine trunks farther uphill and created tension lines to reduce the shuttle's movement. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it could buy us enough time. As the straps tightened, the vehicle stopped shifting. The commander nodded. "Let's go." One rescuer climbed toward the shuttle. Then another. Soon I joined them. The first passenger we reached was an elderly man with a broken leg. He apologized repeatedly for slowing everyone down. "You'll apologize after you're safe," I told him. He managed a weak smile. Using a rescue harness, we lifted him carefully up the slope. Then came a young mother holding a frightened little girl. The child refused to let go of her stuffed rabbit, even while firefighters carried her through the snow. Seeing that small toy somehow made the entire situation feel even more real. One by one, more passengers emerged. Some walked. Some had to be carried. Some cried quietly as paramedics wrapped blankets around their shoulders. Each successful rescue made everyone believe we could save the rest. Then the mountain reminded us we were running out of time. A loud crack echoed above us. Fresh snow slid down the hillside, bringing rocks and loose branches with it. "Move!" someone shouted. Everyone scrambled away from the edge. The shuttle lurched several inches lower. One of the anchor straps stretched dangerously. For a terrifying moment, I thought everything was about to fail. I rushed toward the nearest anchor point. The steel stake had begun pulling free from the frozen ground. Without thinking, I grabbed a heavier anchor from our equipment pile and drove it deeper using a rescue hammer. Another firefighter reinforced the second line beside me. Together we tightened both straps again. The movement stopped. Barely. Inside the shuttle, only 2 passengers remained. A teenage boy trapped beneath a collapsed seat. And the driver. The boy was freed first. His ankle had been pinned, but rescuers managed to cut away enough twisted metal to pull him out safely. That left only the driver. His legs were trapped beneath the crushed dashboard. Hydraulic tools slowly forced the metal apart while everyone watched the tension lines. No one spoke. No one wanted to distract the rescue crew. Finally, after what felt like hours, the driver was lifted onto a stretcher. The moment he reached solid ground, applause erupted from firefighters, paramedics, volunteers, and even the rescued passengers. Every single person had survived. Only then did I realize several television cameras had been filming from the highway above. A reporter approached me with a microphone. "Sir, can we ask your name?" I shook my head. "The people you should interview are the rescue teams." Before she could ask another question, I picked up my toolbox, climbed into my truck, and quietly drove away through the falling snow. I believed the story had ended on that mountainside. I couldn't have been more wrong. I slept for nearly 12 hours after returning from Pine Ridge. Every muscle in my body ached. My gloves were still damp from the snow, and my boots sat beside the front door covered in frozen mud. I expected to wake up, make some coffee, and spend another quiet day alone. Instead, I woke to my phone vibrating non-stop. Missed calls. Text messages. Voicemails. Even neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months were trying to reach me. Confused, I turned on the television. The local morning news was replaying footage from the rescue. There I was, kneeling beside the anchor lines while firefighters secured the shuttle. Another clip showed me helping an injured passenger climb the slope before disappearing into the snowfall. A headline stretched across the bottom of the screen. "Retired engineer helps save 12 lives in Christmas Eve rescue." I sighed. That was exactly the kind of attention I had tried to avoid. The station replayed interviews with firefighters, who insisted that my experience had prevented the shuttle from falling farther into the ravine. I appreciated their kindness, but they deserved far more credit than I did. Just as I reached for the remote, someone knocked loudly on my apartment door. When I opened it, Elara stood in the hallway. Her eyes were red. She looked as though she hadn't slept all night. Before I could say a word, she wrapped her arms around me. "I'm so sorry, Dad." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I simply hugged my daughter, wondering what had finally changed. She stepped inside, wiping tears from her face. "I saw the news," she whispered. "I wish you hadn't had to." She looked around my apartment. The Christmas tree was still standing. The wrapped gifts remained exactly where I had left them. Even the loaf of cinnamon bread sat untouched on the kitchen counter. "I ruined Christmas," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "Something else ruined Christmas." She lowered her head. "I need to tell you everything." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Outside, fresh snow continued falling over the apartment complex. Inside, she finally told me the truth. 2 weeks earlier, Celine Ashcroft had invited her to lunch at an exclusive country club. Ilara assumed they would discuss wedding plans. Instead, Celine placed a thick folder on the table. "What is this?" Ilara had asked. "Information you deserve to know." Inside were newspaper articles dating back more than 20 years. Construction accidents, bridge closures, emergency inspections. Every article included my name somewhere in the story because I had worked on the engineering teams assigned to investigate those projects. The reports sounded alarming at first glance. What the folder didn't include were the official investigations that cleared every engineer involved, including me. Celine carefully left those pages out. According to her, my presence at the Christmas gathering would create unnecessary questions among important guests connected to her charitable foundation. "If people recognize Anton's name," Celine had warned, "they may think our family associates with scandal." Ilara argued that none of it was true. Celine remained perfectly calm. Then she delivered the real threat. "If your father attends, the wedding funding disappears." She also warned that Nathan's position within the family business could suffer. Business partners might reconsider future investments. The engagement itself could become difficult to maintain. Ilara admitted she panicked. She believed she was protecting both families by asking me to stay away. Every day afterward she wanted to call back and explain everything. Every day she lost the courage. As she finished speaking, tears rolled down her face again. "I chose fear instead of trusting you." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You made a mistake." She nodded silently. "But mistakes can be repaired." She looked surprised. "You forgive me?" "I don't forgive the lie." I squeezed her hand gently. "But I'll always forgive my daughter." She broke down crying once more. Neither of us noticed another phone call arriving on my cell. The caller left a voicemail. It came from someone neither of us had ever met. A journalist named Rowan Meyer. His message contained one sentence that immediately caught my attention. "Mr. Vesper, I believe the woman who kept you away from Christmas is hiding something much bigger than your family realizes." I listened to Rowan Meyer's voicemail 3 times before calling him back. His tone had been calm, almost cautious, but there was enough confidence in his voice to make me curious. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Vesper?" "Yes. Thank you for calling. What exactly do you know about Celine Ashcroft?" There was a brief pause. "I'd rather show you than explain it over the phone." An hour later, Ilara and I met Rowan at a quiet cafe in the downtown business district. He looked younger than I expected, carrying a worn messenger bag instead of the polished appearance I usually associated with television reporters. After introducing himself, he placed a stack of folders and a laptop on the table. "I've been investigating the Ashcroft Hope Foundation for almost 11 months. Ilara frowned. "My future mother-in-law's charity?" "Yes." Rowan opened one of the folders. On paper, it's one of the state's most respected non-profit organizations. It raises millions every year for disaster relief and community rebuilding projects. "That sounds legitimate," I said. "That's exactly why nobody questioned it." He turned the laptop toward us. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Large donations entered the foundation's accounts every few months. Then, almost immediately, huge consulting payments were transferred to several private companies. The names meant nothing to me. "They're shell companies," Rowan explained. "They exist mostly on paper." "Can you prove that?" Ilara asked. "I could prove the money disappeared. I couldn't prove who ordered it." He leaned back. "Until yesterday." I exchanged a confused glance with Ilara. "My rescue?" I asked. Rowan nodded. "The news coverage changed everything." He explained that after seeing my name on television, several retired engineers contacted his newsroom. They remembered working on community renovation projects funded by Celine's charity years earlier. At the time, many of them had questioned unusually high construction budgets. Some projects were reported as fully completed even though parts of the work had never been finished. None of the engineers had spoken publicly because they feared legal battles they couldn't afford. But when they saw you risking your life for strangers, Rowan said, they decided it was time to stop staying silent. One engineer provided copies of internal inspection reports. Another shared emails showing repeated pressure to approve unfinished work. A former project accountant secretly turned over financial records she had kept for years. Every new witness strengthened the case. For the first time, Rowan believed he could connect the missing money directly to decisions made inside Celine's organization. Ilara covered her mouth with both hands. "I can't believe this." "There's more," Rowan replied quietly. He opened another folder. Inside were photographs of community centers that supposedly received complete renovations through the foundation. One building still had exposed wiring. Another had leaking ceilings. A playground listed as fully rebuilt contained rusted equipment that clearly hadn't been replaced in years. The reports filed with donors claimed every project had exceeded expectations. The photographs told a completely different story. I felt my stomach tighten. "So that's why she was afraid of my name." Rowan nodded. "Not because of your past. Because she couldn't risk anyone looking too closely at hers." Ilara stared at the documents in silence. Everything Celine had built her reputation on suddenly looked fragile. Rowan closed the final folder. "I'm publishing the investigation tomorrow morning." I looked directly at him. "Are you certain your evidence is solid? I wouldn't risk innocent people." His confidence was steady. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed immediately. "What happened?" I asked. Rowan slowly looked up. "Someone just broke into my office. And the only thing they stole." He swallowed hard. Was every original document connected to Celine Ashcroft? For a few seconds, none of us spoke. "The originals are gone?" I asked. Rowan nodded grimly. "My editor just called. Whoever broke into the newsroom ignored the computers, cameras, and cache. They went straight for the locked filing cabinet." Ilara's face turned pale. "That can't be a coincidence." "It isn't," Rowan replied. He immediately drove back to his office while Ilara and I followed in my truck. Police officers had already sealed off the newsroom when we arrived. The front door showed no signs of forced entry. Whoever had entered either possessed a key or knew exactly how to bypass the security system. Inside, desks were untouched. Coffee mugs still sat beside keyboards. Nothing appeared out of place except one cabinet with its lock drilled open. The folders containing Rowan's original evidence had vanished. One detective shook his head. This wasn't a random burglary. Rowan looked exhausted. "I kept digital copies." "Then we're not finished," I said. He gave a weak smile. "I thought the same thing." Back inside the conference room, Rowan opened his laptop. Every scanned document was still there. Financial records, inspection reports, email exchanges, photographs. Nothing had been lost. "I backed everything up to an encrypted cloud server months ago," he explained. "I only kept the originals in case we needed them for court." The detective nodded with relief. That was a smart decision. While everyone reviewed the files, Rowan suddenly stopped scrolling. "What is it?" I asked. "I've never noticed this before." He enlarged one email attached to the evidence. At first glance it looked ordinary. A payment authorization. A project update. Then he zoomed in on the signature block. Beneath Celine Ashcroft's digital signature appeared a small line automatically added by her office software. It listed the originating department. Not the Ashcroft Hope Foundation. Ashcroft Private Holdings. Rowan looked at me. Her charity wasn't paying these contractors. So who was? He opened several more emails. The same signature appeared again. And again. Every suspicious payment originated from Celine's private investment company before being disguised as charitable expenses. It means donor money wasn't just disappearing, Rowan said. It was being redirected into projects that increased the value of properties her company already owned. The detective immediately called the state's Financial Crimes Division. Within 2 hours, investigators obtained emergency warrants to freeze accounts connected to both organizations. The next morning, Rowan's story was published online. It spread faster than anyone expected. Television stations interrupted regular programming. Newspapers printed special editions. Former employees began contacting investigators one after another. Some admitted they had signed paperwork they never fully understood. Others described being pressured to remain silent. By afternoon, federal agents arrived at Celine's headquarters carrying boxes for evidence collection. She refused every request for an interview. Instead, her attorneys released a statement claiming she had become the victim of a politically motivated attack. The explanation collapsed before sunset. A former executive assistant came forward with audio recordings she had secretly made during staff meetings. One recording captured Celine giving unmistakable instructions. If anyone asks questions, delay them until the quarterly reports are finished. By then the money will already be somewhere else. There was no confusion. No missing context. Everyone recognized her voice. The recording aired on every major news network that evening. I watched from my apartment with Elara sitting beside me. She didn't celebrate. She simply stared at the television, struggling to accept that someone she had trusted had manipulated so many lives. Then my phone rang. Nathan. It was the first time he had ever called me directly. Mr. Vesper, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I should have listened when Elara tried to defend you. He paused. I'm ending my mother's involvement in our wedding. I glanced toward Elara. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they came from relief instead of guilt. Outside, snow continued falling across the city. For the first time since Christmas began, it finally felt as though the storm inside our family was coming to an end. The first Saturday of January felt more like Christmas than Christmas itself. A week had passed since the rescue on Pine Ridge, and the headlines had finally begun to move on to other stories. Reporters no longer waited outside apartment buildings. Television crews had packed away their cameras. The noise surrounding Celine Ashcroft's downfall slowly faded, leaving behind something much more valuable. Peace. Elara arrived at my apartment just before noon carrying 2 grocery bags. I hope you haven't eaten yet, she said with a smile. I was told someone planned to take over my kitchen. She laughed. I learned from the best. For the first time in weeks, our conversation felt natural. No awkward pauses. No hidden guilt. No fear hanging over every sentence. Nathan arrived a little later with a homemade apple pie that looked slightly uneven. I baked it myself, he admitted. It may not look impressive. I cut him off with a grin. If it tastes good, nobody will remember what it looked like. The 3 of us spent the afternoon preparing the Christmas dinner we never had. The cinnamon bread I had baked before Christmas was gone, so Elara insisted we make another loaf together. As we measured flour and mixed the dough, she found the leather recipe book still resting on my bookshelf. You never gave this to me. I was waiting for Christmas. She gently opened the cover. Inside the first page, I had written a short message. For every holiday we missed, may these recipes help us find our way back to one another. She quietly wiped away another tear before hugging me. This is the best gift I've ever received. Later that evening, we gathered around my small dining table. There were no expensive decorations. No formal speeches. No wealthy guests trying to impress each other. Only homemade food, familiar stories, and honest laughter. It reminded me that the size of a celebration has very little to do with the size of the room. After dinner, Nathan cleared his throat. I have some news. Elara looked at him curiously. My father has removed Celine from every leadership position connected to our family businesses. He paused before continuing. The foundation's board voted to dissolve the organization completely. A new non-profit will be created under independent management, and every financial record will be open to public review. It wasn't an attempt to erase what had happened. It was an attempt to make sure it could never happen again. A few weeks later, investigators formally charged Celine with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, falsifying financial records, and obstructing an investigation. Several properties connected to her investment company were seized. Awards that once decorated her office became meaningless. The reputation she had spent decades building disappeared in a matter of days because it had been built on deception instead of integrity. As for Rowan Meyer, his investigation received national recognition. When reporters congratulated him, he always gave credit to the people who had finally found the courage to tell the truth. He often reminded audiences that evidence matters, but honest witnesses matter just as much. One afternoon he called me. "I've been offered a position at a national newspaper." "You earned it." "So did you." I smiled. "I only happened to be in the right place." "No," Rowan replied. "You chose to help when everyone else was still deciding what to do." His words stayed with me long after the call ended. Looking back, I realized the rescue on that snowy mountainside had not only saved 12 strangers. It had rescued my own family from a lie that might have separated us forever. If I had stayed home feeling sorry for myself, none of the truth would have come to light. Life has a strange way of rewarding quiet acts of kindness when we least expect it. Today, Elara visits every Sunday. The recipe book grows thicker as we add new family meals together. The leather journal I bought for her now sits on her desk, already filled with plans for the future. Every Christmas since then, we celebrate one simple tradition before opening presents. We sit together, look around the table, and remind ourselves that no title, no fortune, and no public reputation will ever matter more than trust. Because trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. But when rebuilt with honesty, it becomes stronger than it ever was before. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more original emotional stories filled with unexpected twists and meaningful endings. I'll see you in the next story.